Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Black Book Podcast. Today, I have another amazing guest. All of my guests are amazing, but I always tell them we have another amazing guest. And today, this guest is probably one of my best friends ever since I've met this person. Back in 2016, we came into China together. She was my first roommate, and we had some ebbs and flows. Just say that we had some ebbs and some flows, but we came back and we are stronger than ever. We have not lived with each other since the beginning of 2017, but we've always been there for each other.
But we haven't lived without each other either.
Exactly. So can everybody please just welcome my really good friend, Elsie Green, to the show. Elsie has a nice interview and a nice story for us, so please, let's start. But Elsie, can you please just tell us, where you're from and how you got to China, even though you're not in China right now, but let's just talk about that.
Yeah, I'm not in China right now. I actually came back from China in July,
Right.
to the West Coast. I came back from China to the Southern California area near LA. But I'm not from that part of the country. I moved to China from the Charlotte, North Carolina area. So I was in the South and came back to the West, which was kind of interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. I remember you were telling me when we were roommates about your trials and tribulations in North Carolina.
But you're talking about the work.
Yeah, you're working.
The work.
Your work in North Carolina, and maybe do you want to speak on that at all, or is that?
I can. I'm limited as to what I can share, but I will say it's been my honor to be able to work with some of the most passionate, serious, dedicated, young, knowledgeable activists in the country through the work that I was able to do as a resident in Charlotte, North Carolina. I think probably our most notable work was shutting shit down and fucking shit up in Uptown Charlotte on the nights of September 20th and September 21st, 2016, after the murders of Keith Lamont Scott and Justin Carr. And we were able to do some amazing things that got the attention of government leaders to make change in the city. I had planned my trip to China prior to that, but that experience actually catapulted me and helped me know that I needed to be more international, especially in my understanding of what my purpose is as an activist as well.
Absolutely. So I remember, as we were roommates, we were talking about why you came to China, or how you found the job that brought you to China. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Excuse me for moving around a little bit. I'm sitting in a strange chair. My last job in America was as an information systems and technology manager for Apple, which was a very demanding job, very high paying, but low extra time, low personal time. And I experienced working for the most amazing company on the planet, but decided that I might have wanted to be able to have a more simple experience as a human being and not have to make so much money to live comfortably, which i.e. means not work so hard. And I started looking at places. I resigned from Apple. I took a leave of absence following the passing of my father, following a divorce, and following 5 miscarriages during the time that I worked there, never taking any time off, and still being held accountable. I decided to take a leave of absence. And during that leave of absence, part of the conditions of the leave of absence was that I would have to seek psychological counseling through my insurance company to maintain my leave of absence. And as I did, I had one meeting with a psychologist who said, "Baby, you working too hard." She said, "It ain't nothing wrong with you." She said, "Your job is too demanding. You need to find a way to live more simply." And so I resigned from Apple and hiked mountains for months and decided to figure something else out, and decided that if I resigned from Apple, my next step had to be big, because I'm that big kind of person. I'm a driven, enthusiastic, ambitious type of chick. And so whatever I did next had to go in the books.
Right.
And I knew that meant I had to leave the country because I just came from Apple. The Apple that's $1 trillion, the Apple that has more money than the government.
Right.
So whatever I did next had to be big. I reached the top of my own mountain. And so I knew I had to leave the country. You know, I was under a contract with Apple that restricted where I could work next.
Oh, you on those non-competes?
I was under a 5-year non-compete. 5-year. And when I tried to work outside of my organization, but outside of my field, when everybody found out I worked for Apple, it's like saying Michael Jackson was my ex-boyfriend. Nobody wanted to compete with that. Nobody wanted the person that came from Apple. Well, why do you want to work here? You know what I'm saying? I can't say because I don't want to work so hard no more. You know,
right?
You can't say in an interview because I'm tired of working hard. I just want an easy job that's gonna pay me decent. So I decided to leave the country. I started looking for jobs in parts of Africa because my passions are in Africa. But I wasn't able to find anything that was going to be lucrative enough to have a simple lifestyle. I'll speed up the story a little bit and say that I decided on China simply because it paid well.
Right. Yeah.
That was it. It paid well.
I mean, a lot of people come to China for those reasons.
Just because it paid well. I knew the food was going to be good. I knew that it would be easy to get a visa based on what I was told. I started my Tefl and finished it in 6 days. I took, I put all my time and energy into, I worked from home anyway. I worked from home for almost a decade. So time management at home was easy for me.
Yeah. For those who don't know what a TEFL is, it's a certificate that allows you to teach English as a second language, basically.
Yeah. Teaching English as a foreign language certificate. You got it.
Yeah.
And so I got that in a short amount of time so I could start interviewing right away. Now, I'm going to speed up a little bit faster because there's more to the story. Along the path after I got accepted to a job, which was my first choice, I went to EF first like everybody else. Along the way, after I got accepted to EF, started my visa process, had my date. I had my date to leave as October 16th. We fucked shit up on September 21st. I got arrested on October 2nd. So fortunately, I had China in the works. Right. But on November 9th, I found out I was pregnant. I found out I was pregnant. And so I had a decision to make. And I decided to still go. Because America had dried up for me. And there wasn't anything here that I wanted. And I considered that if my ancestors knew I was going to be pregnant when they gave me the instruction to go to China and they opened all the doors that I needed to do it, then that was the next step. Right. And it'd be cheaper for her to go with me in my belly than for me to stay home for another year and get shit in order, whatever that is, and then go with a child. Right. So I decided to just do it. And a few days later, I met you.
Yeah, it's exactly how the story went. Yeah, and me and you decided to be roommates because we basically just hit it off as soon as we met. Not as soon as we met. It was like a day or two.
I'm going to tell you why you and I decided to be roommates. Because we were the only Black people we could trust.
At the time.
I was getting ready to move in with that one girl who was showing her emotional instability. And I was like, I'm 36 years old. I'm not moving in with no 23-year-old unstable girl. I'm going to end up having to show her where I'm from. And we had seen that and experienced it together. And we were like, come on, let's do this.
Right.
I trust you. You from Chicago. My daddy from Chicago. You talk like my daddy. You make sure I get across the street safe.
And now that I remember it, I think that apartment we had, I think we stole that apartment from them because we went with that girl because she was looking for an apartment. We were still looking for an apartment as well, but the apartment agent Mark, that's his name, I think, he was showing her that apartment, and we just happened to go along with her, and we were like, "Oh,
it was
actually,
hers, we didn't steal it.
Let's take that away." We were like, "We got the money right now. We want this." But he wasn't showing us; he was showing her.
And if you ask me, we overpaid for that apartment anyway. Every place we've stayed in after that has been nicer and cheaper.
Yeah, that is true.
They have a bad habit in China of showing Black folks raggedy ass apartments.
I agree.
And we have to tell them, what would make you think I would live here? Would you live here? Why are you showing me this? I told you what my budget was. I told you where I want to live. You showing me this? This what you got for that? Come on now.
That is
so that's
absolutely
what we ended
true.
up with.
That's
we ended up with an apartment where the baseboards were coming off the walls, and you had to. Oh, it was bad. I didn't even realize how bad it was until we lived somewhere else.
Until I moved somewhere else. Yeah, that's absolutely true. But I also have to say that, like, I don't know if you've ever been inside of a local person's apartment, but like
that ain't none of my business, because that's their problem.
I have though, and it's like it's not that much different, but there should be a difference.
I've also been in local. I have been in local apartments that are spectacular.
I mean, yeah, like usually because someone bought them and they renovated it. Maybe not. They're not probably paying rent, right? So usually that's what people in China do. You like, man, you know this, right? That people usually, that concept of buying houses is like how we look at condos in America, right? So like you buy an apartment in China and that's your house for 70 years until you know, that's how, until you re-sign up for it and stuff like that. But people, they don't really like. I've never heard of anyone in China buying a brand new apartment. They always go and buy some old apartment in some old neighborhood and renovate it because they found out they feel like it's cheaper. They feel like it's cheaper. But on the note I was trying to show is that, like, I've been in situations where I've seen someone's apartment who's a local person, but then they drive a nice car, and I'm going, dude, but you can't afford that car.
That's that hood rich shit. That's that China shit.
Like, you have a car that's really nice, but your apartment is not. And that's just not, but that's not just in China. That's people that, yeah, like you said, like people in the hood do that. You know what I'm saying? Like I know plenty of people back in Chicago that, you know, they got a nice car, they got this car note that they can barely afford, but they still live in a home with their mom.
You've watched people from China get off the subway in nice clothes and walk home into one of them things that look like a tenement. And they got the nerve to not sit next to you on the subway because you black. And they don't even have toilet paper in their house.
Oh, I know. I know. I know.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, go ahead. No, but because we all know it's true. Like, you know, and, you know, just to be clear, it's not everybody, but it happens enough for us to notice and go, they do that. You know, they do that. It's not, it won't.
Of course, I'm speaking in generalities.
Yeah. No, but it's okay. But I want to ask you, because your baby's here, and you mentioned you were pregnant when you came to China.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, not a lot of people do this. Not a lot of people come to China who are pregnant, or even come to China with children. You usually find a lot of single people who are traveling abroad and living abroad and working abroad and stuff like that. Even me personally, like I used to work in Chicago. I met a woman who I used to work at a school with, and she was like, once I got the job, she was like, I want to know how to do that, but the only thing that's stopping me is I got kids. And I was like, no, you can bring your kids with you. You can bring your kids with you if you really wanted to and stuff like that. So can you just, take us through the process of, like, you know, being pregnant in China, gone through labor in China, and then, like, what did you do once you had your child? What did you do when you had to start working again?
Tell you this, excuse me. This is the first time I've ever talked about my pregnancy in China publicly.
Mm-hmm.
And there are things that I've wanted to say for many, many years about being pregnant as a foreigner and as a Black person in China, right, and the experiences that I had. And I'll say this. I was appreciative of the respect that some of the doctors showed me about the differences that our babies might have because of their genetic differences. It was never placed upon me that the size or length of my child in utero was expected to be the same as a Chinese baby. As a matter of fact, when it was different, I appreciate that I was advised to seek out a doctor from America to find out if this was normal in America. There wasn't this arrogance that was like, oh, your child is too small. No, it was like, your child's head is a little small for what we've seen. Check with a doctor in America and see if most babies in America are born with this size head. I appreciated that because that was very respectful. What
I'm sorry, I'm laughing.
Well, because it did happen. It did happen. That's a real thing. What I didn't appreciate, though, was the lack of privacy, the lack of cleanliness. I didn't appreciate doctors talking about me in front of me with other patients, or the lack of security in hospitals in which I was laying in a bed after having my baby and a strange man from off the street came in my VIP suite just to stand there and stare at me. Doctors taking video of me while I was having my baby. A doctor putting his fingers inside me to check my uterus with no gloves on and no cover. And while I'm pulling myself back and saying, stop, he's only pushing harder. And I couldn't really walk for the rest of the day. This was when I was 39 weeks, about 2 days before I had my baby. Those kinds of experiences make you forget how much respect you received when somebody said, check with your American doctor to see if your baby's head size is normal. Right. And those kind of experiences feel, and there were more, but those are the ones that sit out now when you ask me about my experience. Right, That's what sits out with me. Those are the ones you got to go sit down and talk to somebody about. Mm-hmm. And I trusted them more than I trusted American doctors. But most of the doctors there are there for money and don't care about people at all. And I'll say it. I've had doctors who were my students tell me, don't take your baby to the hospital. You better mix up a little this, a little that, and a little that. Get that to the baby. Don't take that baby to the hospital because I'm going to tell you. And then they tell me. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
So it was, at first I felt sorry for the people because they have such a uncaring healthcare system. Greedy. Don't want to explain nothing to you. Want you to just say yes. Get offended and mad if you ask a question.
How many times did you go to the hospital?
It's in a book.
Wow.
Because it's all in the book. Mm-hmm. But I would say I started going to the hospital at 37 weeks in China, which was really late. Mm-hmm. 37 weeks? No. I'm sorry. Let me do my math better. 27 weeks. So I had whatever the intervals are on the regular basis up until my baby was born. I had to change hospitals once. I went to a public hospital for a while. Didn't like the fact that there was no soap in the bathroom and they were talking about me being in front of each other, blah, blah, blah. So I decided to go to a private hospital. Mm-hmm. And I went to that hospital for 2 visits prior to having my baby. So altogether, if you're asking for a number, I'd have to say about 7 times. Maybe 7. On one of those visits, I was getting the stress test done, and I noticed the nurse videotaping me. So I mentioned it to one of my friends, who mentioned it to one of her students, who mentioned it to his daddy, who mentioned it to the province's medical director, who called a meeting on my behalf and let the hospital know that was not behavior that would be happening as long as I was there, or he would make sure they got shut down. I appreciated that, but there was no oversight over it because I just mentioned that during my labor, there was a doctor videotaping me. Right. Okay. But 7 or 8 times altogether.
Okay. So 7 or 8 times, and you mentioned that, you started going there late because, you had just moved there and all that other stuff. Do you know, like, if you were to have done everything in America, how many times would you have gone to the doctor before being in labor?
The interval's the same. The interval is the same. So according to when I let a school that I was working at know I was pregnant, and they immediately got to work. I was so grateful. They immediately got to work helping me find another apartment so that it would be suitable for my baby, helping me line up nannies, helping me find the right hospitals and communicating with the hospitals for me. When I said, tell them stop talking about me in front of me, they communicated it for me. When I said those questions are out of line, that has nothing to do with what's happening, they communicated it for me. When I questioned charges, they had my back. And as soon as I told them I was pregnant, they started scheduling appointments. And I was 7 months when I told them. So I only had one appointment in America. By the grace of our ancestors, my Orishas and my Gungun, I went from an 11-week appointment in America and no appointments until I was 7 months. And just paid attention to my body. I'd had a few miscarriages. I'd had 5 previously. So I was used to being pregnant by that time. And I had enough situations that I knew how to listen to my body. So I kind of cared for myself. I wouldn't advise it. But I hid my pregnancy for a while in China, just trying to find my place and make sure I was in a place where my job would take care of me.
Okay, I understand that. And so, so after you had Ashe, which is your daughter's name, or do you want me to say her name? I can't edit that out. Okay.
Yeah, you can say her name. It's Ashe.
Yeah, so after you had Ashe, obviously you had to go back to work after some time. And so how was that? Living at home by yourself with a nanny, but having to go back to work.
When you ask me this question, I think about the women who have the same experience as me. And I know 2 stick out that we know who have had the same experience of having a baby in China. They came there and got pregnant while they had to wake up with nobody in the house but them and that baby. And everybody, wondering what kind of person because they had a baby out of wedlock, but you asked me about going back to work and the experience with the nanny and taking care of my baby by myself. I would never do it again. I went back to work 3 weeks after I had my baby. Now, as wonderful as my school was that I worked with, they lied to me about my social insurance options so that I would take a shorter maternity leave. And they gave me a very small stipend during those. They gave me 1 month off. One of those weeks was the month at my baby. So we went for 2 weeks. So that was a very short time, and it was very difficult. I never really felt like I got to bond with her or spend the time that was necessary. She had somebody taking care of her all her life up until the pandemic hit. Then it was me and her.
Right.
But it was difficult. I had some experiences with nannies who broke contract by taking pictures of my baby and posting them on WeChat. I've had various experiences. I've had some great nannies too that were very helpful. Like I had one nanny.
So the last thing you were talking about was the good nanny. So can you go back to the good nanny?
Yeah, she was a rock star. Her name was Sharon. Well, that was her English name. I think she went by Liu. She had a little short haircut. She always wore boys' clothes. So I think she was butching, but she was married. But she would do stuff like, I sat on my toilet seat one day and I'm like 200 pounds and thick and chocolatey, and I broke that bitch. I broke my toilet seat. And she fixed it for me. She bought one and fixed it for me.
Wow,
and she didn't have to do that. You know what I'm saying? She had curtains installed between my dining room and my kitchen because they ain't got no heat in the houses in China. And it was cold as shit. She had curtains installed for me, professionally installed between the 2 rooms so we could put a space heater in the living room and keep it warm. She didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
I was really grateful. I was surprised they didn't have heat inside the homes, which was
South China doesn't have heat. North China, like in Beijing and like the Northeast, they have coal. They use coal and shit to heat up their houses and stuff.
Oh, I never remember being in Beijing and sleeping cold.
It
was always warm.
That's because in the wintertime, like after like sometime in November, they cut the heat on. And people were like, what do you mean they cut the heat on? Like over the whole half the country
was adequate.
Gets coal, and they burn coal, and they send that shit to all the apartment. Like they send the heat to all the apartment. I don't actually know how they do it, but that's just how they heat up certain places. But in the south of China, even if it gets cold, they don't do that shit, which I don't really understand. Like I'm in Chengdu. Chengdu gets cold. I know you were in Chongqing. Chongqing gets cold, but they don't have that shit. So we were talking about your nannies in China, and like how some of them are helpful, some of them are not helpful, and stuff like that. But other than the aspect of the nannies, what else? What else can you think of in terms of your experiences being a mom and having to work in China?
I think being a mom and having to work in China was similar to what it would have been here. Mm-hmm. Except for the fact that I wouldn't have put my child in a daycare there, which I do here. Mm-hmm. But my costs are still the same.
So the cost
of childcare in China for the 2 nannies that I had is about the same as what I pay for my daughter to go to a daycare in America.
Oh, I see.
Other than that, because she had 2 nannies, so she got a little different kind of attention at home. But working as a mom there, I think is probably the same, especially as a single mom. I'm responsible for a lot. I have to manage a lot of different hats. I don't think it's any different. And there's actually a lot of single moms in China who are Chinese, and people don't know they're single moms. They think that their husbands are they work somewhere else. Because it's very looked down upon to be a single mother. And I've had single mothers tell me in China that I gave them more courage.
Somebody told me it's illegal. I was like, how the fuck is it illegal?
I heard that too. It's illegal.
It is not illegal.
Yeah. I mean, you can pee on the street, but you can't have a baby out of wedlock. Come on. I'd have to find out how that makes sense. But there's a lot of shame cast upon it. I've seen women get married just because they got pregnant. But that part of it is what it is. It's not as bad as it is in some other parts of the world when it comes to that.
Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. So moving on from that part. So even though you didn't get a chance to go to many places because you did have a child to take care of, I think you still might be considered to be a traveler because you did move from one place to another place.
No man, of course.
Yeah.
On.
So like, let's just say in your travels around China, because you did live in multiple cities in China, did one experience differ from the other?
I got to learn a lot about Chinese culture in the different parts of China that I lived in. The North and South are a lot like America, where the North is fast paced, like you got the Beijing, New York. Yeah. And I'd say Shanghai is like Atlanta, where everything's about style and fashion and, looking good and partying good. And it's a little bit more relaxed in the south of China. They call southern China cities the beach cities because they're just more laid back. I really had a much more pleasurable experience in the south as far as the anxiety that can be in the north of China, near Beijing, with the fast pace and everybody's moving fast and bumping into each other. You got to shoulder check everybody. I really enjoyed the space and the sidewalks that the south of China provided. Even as busy as Shanghai is, there's much more space in the sidewalks.
Yeah, I get that feel too. And here's an example. Maybe you've had this experience too. Because remember when we came to China, right? The visa team at the company we worked for, they were on it, right? everything. They wanted you to be done by a certain date, be here at a certain time, don't waste too much time on stuff like this, right? When I moved to Chengdu, and the girl who does all the visa stuff, she'd be like, yeah, Eric, let's meet at 1 o'clock. And, I'd be like, okay, so, if we want to meet at 1 o'clock, that means I need to get there, like around 12:40, 12:45, just to make sure, everything is square. So I get there and I'm waiting for her for almost 30 minutes. And I thought you said, I thought this was just one time, but I've gone to the visa place with her 3 times already. And she's, I'll be there at 1 o'clock. And here
she never texted you or called you to let you know she was going to be late.
But in her mind, in my mind she's late, but in her mind she's not late. She's just what she really meant is around 1 o'clock.
They don't CP time, but let you have showed up late. Dope.
Well, this is just the point I'm trying to make is that like in southern China, right? They don't have this sense of urgency about themselves, right? Even like when I moved here, I didn't even know most of the part of at least in Chengdu, everybody's napping around 12 2 o'clock.
Between 12 and 2, and you better not make it 2.
Between 12 and 2, everybody taking a nap. Everybody's napping. You can't find nobody. Ain't no business getting done.
The bank is closed. You can't pay no bills. Don't you have no taxi? Shoot, he laying on the hood of his car asleep.
Everybody sleep.
I started to appreciate that though, because I would take that time to work out, so I could work out without anybody taking pictures of me outside. And I would meditate. That was my break time too.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I rarely take naps. I haven't been doing it as of lately, but like when I first moved here, I was never taking naps. I was walking around, especially when I first moved here, I was walking around trying to get a feel of the areas and, all this other stuff like that. But yeah, that's like a big difference because in Beijing, ain't nobody taking no naps. It's too much work to get done.
Yeah.
But here is like everybody's taking naps. Restaurants close in afternoon, open it back up at 4 o'clock type thing. Like that doesn't happen in Beijing at all. But it's just like they have a different culture.
I was pregnant in Beijing, and I remember trying to find somewhere to take a nap. Nobody was napping at lunchtime. I was pregnant with jet lag, just like you. You had jet lag too, I think.
Everybody had jet lag, especially that's my first time in China, so that's my first longest flight. The longest flight I had was like 8 hours before that.
Right.
But like, yeah.
At 2:30 in the afternoon.
Trying to listen to some training that
hungry and sleepy.
That didn't really do anything, And then some of that time I got sick. But that's besides the point. And because remember when we first moved here, the pollution in Beijing was so bad. It was like
I got sick. I thought I was gonna lose my baby.
It was like remember? In the 800s, AQI, yeah. The air quality index.
And, it's amazing to me. I'm gonna speak on this for 1 second. It's amazing to me how delusional people in China are about the level of pollution that they live with. I was in Michigan actually last summer, and I was teaching still in China. I worked for this janky university school, and I was still teaching in China, and one of my students said she had a summer cold. And so I pulled up the AQI for Beijing, which is where she was, and I showed her the AQI. It was like 215. I had this student who was in Beijing. I was teaching, and I was living in America at the time, taking a break in America, and then still teaching in China through an online school. And I had a student who lived in Beijing who told me she had a summer cold, and it was probably June. And I looked up the AQI in Beijing that day, and gosh, it was in the triple digits. I can't remember what it was, but it was 56 in Michigan. And I showed her the numbers, and when I tell you this woman got mad and got upset, and after class, she wrote a note and said she didn't like my attitude about China. Okay. So I told her, well, it's okay. We'll help you find another teacher. I just wanted you to know that you weren't sick because of a cold. You were sick because of air pollution. And it was almost as though she would much rather call it a summer cold than discuss what it really was. it bothered her as a national that I pointed out. And I was very elusive about it, you know. I never was direct, very, very passive.
Well, this is the difference between like maybe it's just China, but I want to say Asian cultures. But we definitely know China because we lived in China. But the difference between these places and Western societies like America and the UK is that like we're used to seeing and having negative opinions about our country and our government and people who are supposed to be leaders and everything like that. And there's a lot of countries who have like, you know, authoritarian regimes where like obviously and China's not the only place where, you know, if you say something, something's gonna happen. You know. And so, and you know, China's been like this for a long time. So obviously that this becomes part of their indoctrination into society and stuff like that. So once you meet someone who doesn't like what you say, even though you're not really talking about their leadership,
it hits the heart.
It hits them really badly, and you're not really trying to say anything bad. You're just saying, oh, today is just bad air pollution, so you might want to wear a mask. That's all you were trying to say. But she took that to heart and go, oh, you must be talking about China negatively.
Well, that's because she knows what the fuck is really going on.
Yeah.
And I'm speaking to what the fuck is really going on. You understand? I had a student who told me that a difference between educational culture in China and America is that in China, they're not taught to disagree.
No, they're not.
We're taught to evaluate a subject. We were taught, I don't know if they still teach this in school, but we were taught critical thinking and how to evaluate something's positive pros and cons and come to a conclusion that we can support. There, I'll say this, and I'm gonna try to be careful about how I say this. Everything there is about politics. From the root to the tutor. So from a very young age, children are taught, I'll use that word, taught, how to think politically and how to respond to certain scenarios, either behaviorally or verbally, based on the party line.
Yeah.
So as educators, we are put in a place to facilitate that.
So I want to ask you about being Black in China, and you know, more specifically, would you suggest a Black person to go abroad to China, if they're interested or if they're looking for something new, and anything like that?
Right now, in this day and age, let me make sure I heard your question correctly. I think I heard you ask me basically what advice or what I suggest somebody go to China who might be Black.
I said, would you advise
from any part of the world?
Yeah.
I wouldn't suggest it. Not unless you like to not unless, hold on, let me say this in the right way. Not unless you don't mind having to be a little less dignified and self-respectable. Because living in China in particular will require you to stand up for yourself and your Blackness and get some stones thrown at you and fight some uncomfortable fights and maybe even lose a couple times and maybe even lose your life. Now, I'm not sure that's worth it. You can just stay where you are and do that. But I would say this: if you're gonna go to China, go for 2 weeks and go home.
Well, how about this next question? Would you suggest, because we're both Black Americans, and we know what it's like. You know, we know what it's like to be in in the heat of racism, to be dealing with the police and stuff like this. And we both have had careers. One has been one has been much longer than the other, but that's neither here or there.
So when I heard some shit, I just gotta catch it. One is still you mean because you do the same job you did 4 years ago, your career is longer than mine?
No, I didn't say that. I meant that I was meaning that your career has been longer than mine, like as in your working career.
I mean, that's just because I'm older than you. I'm 13 years older than you. I started working when I was 14.
That's what I was.
You weren't even made yet when I was working. How about that?
I wasn't even giving you shade. I was like props. I was just,
trying to throw shade back. I just had an epiphany of how young you were.
Okay. All right.
It ain't shade in being young. You got all this good energy.
Absolutely. You got that right. But anyway.
I don't see nothing wrong with shit.
We both, we've grown up in America, have dealt with the police, have dealt with certain racism in terms of maybe at schools or at certain jobs and stuff like this. And so like me, I personally advocate, like I'll tell people, hey, you don't have to come to China, but you can definitely go somewhere else, especially if you have a degree, if you have a business idea, if if you know what you want to do, and there are other countries that allow foreigners to come to their country and work in that industry. I suggest people to do it. But what about you?
I would suggest that Black people stay out of anywhere that don't respect us.
Okay.
That's stay at home if you gonna do it. Now, I'm not saying don't travel, because there are ways to travel that don't require you to live somewhere for a year.
Yeah, that's true.
The advice that I had, I actually had a travel mate while I was being involuntarily hosted by the country for 2 months this summer. I had a travel mate, and when we got back to the States, her mother said to me very plainly, the next place you go, you need to make sure it's a place that respects you. Because the fights that you fight, you can fight right here. It's just different food. And the price that we almost had to pay wasn't worth it. Maybe wasn't worth it. So I would say right now, especially the way that the world sees how, I'm going to speak in particular to Black Americans because that's what I am. Black Americans who come from a lineage of slavery. The world has watched us suffer in this country and said not one word. So how you think they'll treat us when we come to their country? Unless you're ready to lick some boots, at some point it just wasn't worth it. Just wasn't worth it. Especially with me having a child. When they started evicting us in Guangzhou just for being Black, forcing us to get tested, but it looked more like a DNA swab. I gotta go. That's the song I heard in my spirit. That Rochelle for real. I tried it out, cried it out. We talked it out, we thought it out. Then we fought it out. Now there's nothing left to do but walk on, walk on, walk on, walk on now. That's what came up. Like, you gotta go.
Right.
Your life is at risk here. We had a baby that came up missing and body found, no details, no nothing. Just a quiet something. The country never even acknowledged it. They never even put it in the news. Time to go, because I'm a mama. Yeah, it was, there was a trajectory change when early 2020 came about, and the events of early 2020 that allowed us to have a different perspective.
Yes, absolutely. And really quickly, I want to make sure that the listeners here are just getting another perspective, right? Because up until your interview, everyone who I have interviewed has been all for, going abroad, staying in
I
China.
know.
Most of them have been
Yeah.
in China, and I knew that our conversation would go like this. So I just wanted to make sure, because I don't want people to think that I'm oblivious, or we should be oblivious to the rest of the world, because we know that racism is everywhere, right? And I don't want to say that one is better than the other, because racism is still fucking racism at the end of the day. Nobody wants to go through that shit, no matter if it's a small white lie or a fucking gunshot to the head. Nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to deal with that shit.
Right.
So this is just another perspective of a person who did travel the fucking world and have experiences and has an opinion about those experiences. So I just wanted to make that clear to everyone who's listening.
Well, let me say this. I have looked at going to other countries and had to look at them through my experience in China.
Mm-hmm.
China broadened my worldview of the amount of indifference and hate that people have for niggas, Black Americans, African Americans, Afro Americans, Negroes, Black people. But they call us niggas. They call us niggas. When on the sign in Guangzhou at the apartment building, it said, "Do not allow Negroes to come here." And they weren't just talking about Black Americans. They were talking about people of African descent from any part of the world. I'll keep the reason they used to the side, because it really doesn't matter why. But there was a blanket mandate throughout the city, and there were hundreds of African people on the street overnight, had paid their rent and couldn't stay where they were supposed to be because of the color of their skin. Well, part of the problem there was there's not one president from the continent of Africa who spoke on their behalf either. There were lower level government leaders who made demands, but there wasn't anybody in power who spoke up. As a matter of fact, the president of a country is probably the oldest recognized nation on the planet, said that it wasn't even happening. So it's difficult to look at those experiences and look them in the face and know that I was a part of a group of people who had to feed people who were being forced into quarantine and not being fed rotten food, not knowing what was in the food, being given pork when their God said no to it. I can't say you should go there as a Black person. It wasn't my experience. Many people have had beautiful experiences there, and I envy them, but I also have known some things they've gone through and just allowed themselves to go through at the sacrifice of acceptance. And if that's what's important to them and that's what they get, then they're successful. But for me, I just can't put myself in a place where people are treated that way who look like me and think it won't eventually hit me. And then when it does, stay. Can't do it. So it sounds negative. It sounds hard, right? It sounds whatever, but that was my experience. And I didn't go there. I would never go to a place looking for this experience. I'm hurt. I'm disappointed. Because I've seen some people there treat me wonderfully. I've had some amazing individual experiences there, but not enough. And the people with the power to make the decisions are complicit. So why stay somewhere you're not wanted? I've said it on WeChat. Why stay somewhere you're not wanted? They don't want us here.
Okay. And here's my last question before we end. Even though you didn't, maybe you don't care for your experience. Is there anything you learned about yourself while you were there?
A lot. There were some good things I learned about myself, but it'd be narcissistic for me to talk about those. What I'll say is I've learned that there was a cultural arrogance that I walked around with as well. Okay. These expectations that I had of a group of people that were completely unfair. And I'll also say that I learned a lot about forgiveness because I had to make some decisions to forgive when I didn't want to, just to be free of it as my own therapy. Okay. You know, I was there for 4 years. I had a lot of experience, met a lot of great people who gave me a lot of feedback about myself. So there was a lot that I learned. You know, there was a lot that I learned. I learned a lot about the unity that's necessary for us to rebuild. Because the thing about the culture is there is a lot of unity there amongst the people. In as much as if you're in Beijing and you walk down the street, you'll see two people holding one bag side by side. But if you're in Chicago, you'll see two people holding two bags and struggling with both of them. Mm. I learned a lot about that shit, about the amount of unity, and also about the ability to play nice when it's necessary, how to be diplomatic. I think there was compassion that I learned that I'm still trying to get access to, because there's still a lot of pain that I hold. I haven't gone through the due process of healing yet. I've actually recently started that process. One thing I would recommend to people who've experienced some of the trauma that I've mentioned, whether it was in trauma or whether it was in China or anywhere else in your own home, one thing that I do, yesterday I had a Reiki massage, and anybody who knows about that knows that it's a spiritually based massage practice that helps your body heal by helping your spirit heal. Mm. And a lot of what I experienced in China came through as to what I experience as my worldview now. Mm-hmm. And some of that stuff I got to shut down. I got to turn it off. I got to reprogram it, because there's a little bit of hate that's set up in me. Right. And it's useless if I can't do nothing about it. Now, if I have hate that I could do something about, then that's called righteous indignation. Mm-hmm. But I can't do nothing about it. It's just going to sit there and make me bitter, so I might as well heal.
Okay. Yeah, I understand that.
So that I would definitely suggest that anybody that comes from those kind of experiences would participate in that kind of practice to heal. I think that many of us who've come back from China have come back with pain. Mm. Well, even those of us now who aren't Black, because white people are now experiencing this racism. They don't know what to do with not being able to get in the nightclub because they're foreigners. But they have pain now too. You know, there's now more of a widespread racism in China that's called xenophobia. Just the fear and disrespect of anybody who don't look like you. And so a lot of us have left China with a lot of pain from our experiences of being on subways and people not wanting to sit next to us because of our size or the color of our skin or our perfume or our hair, you know, right. To not being hired for jobs because of the color of our skin, to kids smelling their fingers after they shake our hand. You know, we've all experienced a little bit of pain. I think that maybe I'm just a little more outspoken about mine. And for me, that's part of my therapy. I appreciate you for that.
No problem. You know, me and you talk all the time. This is just the first time we got it on the podcast, but
you my brother.
Since I started the podcast, we've talked at least 15 times. I don't know,
Yeah.
It ain't been that long since I started the podcast. So
all my business. I tell everybody, anybody who knows me, Eric know you. Yeah. I gotta catch you up on some shit though. I will.
Yeah, we could do that after the show ends. But it's basically, this is the end. As is tradition, I give my guest the last word and then we end. So here you go. Floor is yours. Whatever you want to say.
Okay. I'll say this. I started out, I thanking my ancestors and my Orishas and my Gungun for taking care of me and my daughter. I started out by talking about how I expected that. And I want to end by thanking them for taking care of me. It was there were many times when I was there when they reminded me, we brought you here and we're going to take care of you. We're going to make sure you're good. I don't regret any of the experience. I share honestly, but I don't regret any of it. If I survived it and I keep the memories, then there's no regret. Mm-hmm. And so in that, I want to say that don't let the experiences that I've shared with you today stop you from experiencing the world, because this is a world that we as African people have created and we have a right to experience it. Just make sure that you are knowledgeable of what you might experience and you're prepared to handle the different scenarios that might come up. Don't go in green. You know, that would be my piece of advice. But I want to thank you for having me here. I appreciate you, because I know my perspective is not the popular one for this kind of platform, possibly. It's not popular,
it doesn't matter.
But it's relevant.
It's very relevant. And you've had an experience that I want people to know about, and so that's why I decided to interview you. Like I knew when I was going to ask you that you were going to say yeah, but I also knew that you weren't going to be like everyone else. So, and that's part of me. That's part of why I asked you.
I appreciate that, because I was afraid. I knew what you didn't want, but I didn't know what you did want, and I was like, hey, you know who I am,
though. Yeah, of course, so absolutely. All right, well, guys, I'm Eric Charles. And this is Elsie Green, and that's the Black Book Podcast. I'm just on a mission. I'm trying to live my dream.